It begins with sand and war. We see the Fremen in their Bedouin-style keffiyehs fighting a colonial power over the wealth of the desert, all while wondering who their next oppressors will be. This is Dune, where Arabic, Islam, and the Middle East are the foundation of the story. And where Frank Herbert and Denis Villeneuve created something much more rooted in actual history and real religion than a world with floating barons and giant sandworms may lead you to believe. On Caladan, it's green and wet and not the Middle East. But here we start to understand how deeply connected this entire universe is to Islam. The first tiny clue is actually right here, the year 10-191. Dune is set about 20,000 years into our future, but this calendar is counting from the formation of the Spacing Guild. Interstellar travel is only possible through the Guild, who use spice to expand their minds and fold space. And this is because 10,000 years before the events of the film, AI did what many of us think AI will do. Go crazy and kill everybody. So every computer was destroyed during what was called the Butlerian Jihad. Jihad in Arabic literally means struggle, and of course also means holy war. So the context of the entire Dune series is a universe where thinking machines have been forever banished by a great jihad. And a universe completely dependent on spice. Spice is a lot of things, and it's essentially a drug, not a fuel, but let's not overthink it. The importance of spice was most inspired by oil. Dune was published in 1965. Western dependence on Mideast crude was increasing, and after centuries of foreign rule, countries like Egypt, Iraq, and Kuwait were just gaining independence. And in 1962, Algeria won a brutal guerrilla war against the French. As Frank Herbert was writing, the Arab world was rising. Western people were being exposed to their language, religion, and their struggles in a way never really seen in the modern era. More of this Duneverse-wide Mideast influence is felt early in the film, with names like Rabban, which means ship's captain, and Thufir Hawat, translating to something like victorious protector. We also hear about Emperor Shaddam IV, which is basically just the name Saddam with an H thrown in. Shaddam sits on the Golden Lion throne, and his official title is the Padishah Emperor, which is Persian for Master of Kings. Until 1979, this name was used in Imperial Iran, where the national flag also features a golden lion. And Padishah, not Sultan, was the title used in the Ottoman Empire. For centuries, the Ottomans ruled huge parts of the Middle East, and the plot of Dune has all sorts of similarities with the story of their collapse, and more specifically with the story of Lawrence of Arabia. T.E. Lawrence was the real British officer who helped organize various tribes of Arabia to fight the Ottomans during the First World War, and the Oscar-winning movie of his life was released just 3 years before Dune was published. Lawrence was a foreign aristocrat, born out of wedlock, young and unassuming. He quickly became obsessed with the desert, learning Arabic and everything about Bedouin culture. Stationed in the Middle East, he befriended an Arab tribal leader, was accepted as one of their own, and led an insurgency against an occupying imperial power, with moments of moral doubt along the way. To be clear, I'm not accusing Herbert of plagiarism or anything like that, but I kept having this feeling that I was watching sci-fi Lawrence of Arabia. Jabbar, the name of the poison needle, is taken from the Quran, where the term Jabbar means something like a powerful or arrogant enemy. In Dune, the great houses keep a Jabbar to assassinate their powerful or arrogant rivals. And it's also used by the Order of the Bene Gesserit. I think the Bene part is simple. It's Arabic for sons or children in the sense of a large family clan. The Gesserit part is a bit more complicated, but it sounds a lot like Jesuit. And Herbert's son Brian has said he believes the Jesuits were the inspiration for the name, with the Reverend Mother's gruff demeanor modeled on his father's devout Catholic aunts. However, the Arabic word Jazira, meaning island, had been used historically in North Africa to refer to the territory of a religious mission. But either etymology refers to missionary work, and as we'll see with the Bene Gesserit, that's what they love to do. As Paul arrives on Arrakis, the people shout Lisan al-Gaib. Lady Jessica explains that it means voice from the outer world, and it's a term for their messiah. Herbert kind of invented this as a title, but it's real Arabic, meaning something like tongue of the unseen. And the Fremen also use the synonymous and actual Muslim term, Mahdi. Mahdi means the guided one, and is a major part of Islamic end times theology. I'm going to expand on this complex character later, but the Muslim prophecy does pretty closely resemble Paul, or at least what the Fremen believe Paul is. Also on Arrakis, we hear about the beliefs relating to the moon, meet Stilgar, a Fremen Naib, and see the Kris knife, which was likely inspired by the Indonesian Kris dagger, used by the Javanese Muslims in their wars against the colonial Dutch. We also get our first look at the giant sandworms, known in the Fremen language as Shai Hulud. In Arabic, Hulud means eternity or immortality, and Shay just means thing. And it should be Shay. Shai is actually the word for tea, and maybe it's not a mistake, pronunciations do change over thousands of years, and we'll continue to see these little tweaks as we go through the Arabic of Dune. We see this kind of thing with the origin of the name Arrakis, where Herbert knew multiple etymologies could fit. Arak is the most phonetically obvious, but likely not it. Arak is an aniseed liquor with psychedelic allusions to spice, and the most popular theory is Arrakis, the name given by Arab astrologists to the real star system Mu Draconis. The question is never which, but how many words or concepts were used as inspiration. You just keep reading and digging and finding real events from history that were adapted to create this universe. In 1960, The Sabres of Paradise by Leslie Branch was published, and it's based on the true story of the brutal war between the Islamic tribes of the Caucasus Mountains and the Russian Empire. The Muslims were led by Imam Shamil, a charismatic, religious, and military figure, holding out in rock-cut fortresses and winning battles outnumbered 5 or 6 to 1. From this book, we get Chakobsa, the name of the Fremen language, and we also see Sich and Taber. Both words mean a kind of fortified camp, so the translation of Sich Taber is camp. And while the Fremen carry the Kris knife, the great houses have the Kinjal. These blades were popular throughout the Islamic world, but here Herbert specifically took them from the Caucasus. And I think this book is also where a lot of the inspiration for both the Sardaukar and the Harkonnens came from. In Persian, Sardar means leader, and functionally the Sardaukar were mostly influenced by the Ottoman Janissaries. They're brought up as warriors on the prison planet Seleucia Secundus, and the Janissaries were an elite slave force instilling captured enemy children with an intense loyalty to the Sultan. But I think the Sardaukar ferocity comes from the Cossacks, who were the Tsar's shock troops who terrorized and eventually defeated the Muslims in the Sabres of Paradise. And while the Harkonnens were based a bit on ancient Rome, a little on Scandinavia, their brutality came from the Russians and their cruel suppression of the Caucasus. The Baron's name is Vladimir. His father's name was Dmitri. And if anyone was the archetypal bad guy to a red-blooded 1960s American like Frank Herbert, it was the Russians. At the Battle of Arakeen, we see this calculating cruelty. Duke Leto is killed, the Atreides wiped out, and Paul and his mother flee into the desert. And this mother-son exile into the wilderness thing really resembles the story of Hajar and Ishmael from the Quran. Hajar was the prophet Abraham's concubine and had a son named Ishmael. When Abraham later has a son with his actual wife, Hajar and Ishmael are banished to the desert. But they miraculously survived, and Ishmael went on to become the patriarch of the Arab people and therefore the Muslims. Just like in Dune, where the son and his concubine mother survived to be found by the Fremen, the people Paul will eventually lead. But before getting into that world, finally, after 2 years, it's time to see Dune Part 2. Alright, I just saw Dune Part 2, and yes, by that I mean I saw it about a week ago and just changed my shirt to suggest the passage of time. Anyway, we get a quick peek at the Emperor, but otherwise it picks up where Part 1 left off, with Paul and Jessica first arriving at Sich Taber. I already said Sich was a Cossack word for camp, but I also said Herbert loves a good double etymology. Sich sounds a lot like the Arabic word Sikh, which is the name of the winding entrance to the city of Petra. And the visuals of this arrival scene definitely seem to be inspired by this place. We also see the Fremen in Bedouin-inspired dress, we hear them ululating, they pray in the traditional Muslim style, and of course we get to hear them speak. Herbert envisioned the Fremen language as an evolution of Arabic, but aside from a handful of key words, the Chakobsa in the film was completely invented by David J. Peterson, the same guy who made up Dothraki for Game of Thrones. There are sounds and elements of Arabic conjugation, but when you hear the Fremen talk, it's not something anyone from the Mideast would really understand. And actually, that can be true of the real words as well. While Herbert did great research, and words like Mahdi and Naib are everyday Arabic, other ones are kind of strange, to the point they might not even really register to a native speaker. And actually, several have told me they didn't even realize terms like Shai Hulud were real Arabic until they saw it explained online. But again, that is real Arabic, but maybe not in a form that anyone today would ever use. Anyway, the only thing the Fremen want to talk about is whether or not Paul is the Mahdi / Lisan al-Gaib. Another thing invented for the movie is the Fremen's ideological divide over the Mahdi between North and South, which immediately made me think of the Sunni-Shia divide in Islam. Yes, what I'm about to talk about is an oversimplification. But there are links in the description to more info, and I'm sure there will be lots of comments expounding on everything I missed, which is exactly what I want. Opinions, questions, debates. So leave a comment, hit the like button, and now let's get back to the oversimplification. All Muslims believe Jesus is the Messiah. And if you didn't know, well, that's a whole other topic, but basically yes, this Jesus. To the Shia, the Mahdi is not the Messiah, and it's a fundamental doctrine that he's a specific person already born but hidden away until the end times, when he'll sort of pave the way for the Messiah. In Sunni Islam, most also see him as different from the Messiah, but who he is and where he'll come from is more vague. And according to the book, the Fremen are actually descended from the Sunni. Remember that Dune is about actual humans 20,000 years in the future. A fictional future, obviously, but still a very highly educated vision of what the evolution of religion could look like. And it goes like this. Over time, Earth's religions split, merge, and change. A glimpse of this is an event called the Commission of Ecumenical Translators, a gathering of leaders from religions like the Hasidic Lutherans, Zen Baptists, 10th-day Adventists, and dozens more. Herbert had a ton of fun with these names, but it's not that crazy of an idea. Christianity sprang from Judaism, Islam from Christianity, and the fact Jesus is the Messiah in both is an amazing example of this evolution. Anyway, over thousands of years and the expansion of humanity throughout the universe, Herbert imagines Islam slowly morphing with Buddhism, eventually becoming Buddhism, complete with different branches such as Zen Sunni and Zen Shia. The Fremen come from the Zen Sunni wanderers who traveled from planet to planet looking for a place to be free men, eventually finding that freedom for a bit on Arrakis. But before the name Fremen, they called themselves the Musa, which is the real Arabic name of Egypt. Their legends also say they came from a place called Nilotic el-Ruba, meaning something like Nile Valley. North Africa and the Nile Valley are where we find several historical examples that strongly influenced Dune. The Fatimid Empire was founded in Tunisia by Abdallah al-Mahdi Billah, who you might have guessed claimed to be the Mahdi. Through religion, he was able to mobilize the desert Berber people, eventually founding the city of Cairo and establishing an enormous caliphate. 900 years later, the Nile Valley was where the Sudanese Mahdi claimant Muhammad Ahmed led an extremely successful revolt against the colonial English, capturing Khartoum and destroying an entire British army. These events weren't just used as inspiration for the Fremen, but it's supposed to be their actual history. Herbert didn't simply spice up these invented people with a little Arab or Islamic flair. These are the descendants of the people of the Middle East. It's really my favorite thing about Dune. It's a fanciful but well-researched narrative about the evolution of culture and religion, and adds this multi-layered connection to our real world that's thought-provoking, mysterious, a bit frightening. It's just awesome. As part of his training, Paul must make a night crossing of the desert. Probably the biggest laugh in the movie is when Stilgar warns him not to listen to the Jinn. Jinn are a real concept from the Quran and pre-Islamic Arabia. They're not angels, not demons, but free-willed, usually invisible spirits. They're also tricksters. And the Jinn are where the West got the idea and word genie. Paul continues to learn, lead successful raids, and officially becomes a Fedayeen, or fighter. And this is based on the Arabic word Fedayeen, meaning warriors. And after proving himself by riding a sandworm, Paul chooses the Arabic-inspired Usul and Muad'dib as his new Fremen names. Jessica also had to prove herself by drinking the water of life, which is basically concentrated spice in the form of drowned baby sandworm bile. We know the worms are holy to the Fremen. Bless the Maker and his water. I serve only one master, and his name is Shai Hulud. But this is probably the biggest departure the Fremen make from their Muslim roots. And that's because associating anything with God in Islam is maybe the worst sin someone can commit. It's called shirk, or association, and is the opposite of tawheed, meaning the oneness of God. The Quran is very clear that nothing in creation is like God. And to the Fremen, Shai Hulud is exactly that. Not God, but an embodiment of him on the planet. Spice's psychedelic spiritual power is mostly taken from Native American traditions of psychoactive plants like peyote, but you can also make a connection to the medieval Arab order of assassins, or at least the romanticized and somewhat exaggerated Western perception of their use of mind-expanding hashish. Lady Jessica was powerful even before her mind was expanded by the water of life. But like other Bene Gesserit, she definitely seems to be the power behind the throne in her role as a Sayyidina, an invented female form of the title Sayyid, which was given to the male descendants of the Prophet Muhammad. And the Bene Gesserit have a ton of shadowy power. Every event is somehow guided by their actions as part of a centuries-long effort to breed a Messiah-like figure, to breed Paul. But they didn't want it to be Paul, but too bad. He is the Kwisatch Haderach. So this is the one bit of Hebrew language we get. Kwisatch is a Herbertian twist of Kvisat, meaning to shorten, and Haderach, the road, a reference to the ability to see between every point in time. Meaning that after Paul drinks the water of life, he's fulfilled his genetic destiny. And this has changed his attitude towards war, as the Lisan al-Gaib, sort of resigned to his fate and someone who will cause millions of deaths. And that's exactly what he does. Gathers the Fremen, the Atomics, the Worms, and kicks the shit out of the Sardaukar. So the ending of part 2 really kind of brought me back to Lawrence of Arabia, who was also deeply changed by his own thirst for revenge. He knows he must continue to fight, but realizes that he's just leading the Arabs toward further suffering under a new form of oppression. And I don't bring him up to keep pointing out the plot similarities, but I want to talk for a second about the idea of the white savior. And I know any mention of this makes people furious one way or the other, but just give me a second. The film Lawrence of Arabia is racist. Arabs are generally portrayed as a brave but selfish people, intelligent but backwards and unorganized. They needed Lawrence to defeat the Ottomans, and on the surface of it, it feels like the Fremen needed Paul to defeat the Harkonnens and the Emperor. But would they have eventually done it themselves? And more importantly, did they end up better off? With the Arabs after World War I, that's a pretty clear no. I mean, 106 years later, and the lingering, bloody effects of the British mandates are literally still front-page news. And in Dune, we see hints from his future visions, and hopefully in a Dune Messiah movie, that Paul is not the good guy. He may be a white savior, but the message is not that that's a good or necessary thing. With the casting, yes, it would have been really good to use more Arab and Muslim actors. But wow, did they do a better job than either of the previous adaptations. And I think the film tried to find a middle ground. Honor the Fremen's Arab roots, but make them their own people. Most of the Arabic words and Islamic concepts made it from the book to the movie, but 2 in particular did not. 2 that were maybe the most meaningful in the entire story. The first one we've already talked about, Jihad. This is changed to Holy War, and is the final climactic line of the movie. The Holy War begins. The other is Ya Chuhada, which in the book means long live the fighters, but in the movie is changed to just an invented phrase. And it's a big deal. Ya Chuhada is like Dune's May the Force be with you, but the more accurate translation of Yahya Shuhada is long live the martyrs. To Western ears, martyr and jihad are definitively linked with Islamic terrorism, so they were deleted. And I honestly don't know if that was the right choice. I don't have to worry about offending anyone, and I'm not in a position to be offended. But I do think those hard decisions, as well as any backlash about casting, theology, or storyline that the film may receive, at least shows how astounding Dune is. Here we are talking about obscure Quranic verses, medieval Muslim caliphs, and all sorts of Arabic words. We wanted to learn about, explore, and appreciate the language and religion that inspired this not completely fictional universe. So I really hope to talk about all this in the comments. This was just a tiny scratching of the surface of all the Islam and Arabic in Dune. Again, I have links in the description to my sources and further discussions about all these topics. So please hit the like button, it really helps to spread the video. And if you want to support my channel, there's ways to do that in the description as well.